Today, Rehmeyer's Hollow, sometimes called Hex Hollow, in York County, is known as a place to visit at Halloween. Young men frighten their female companions. Fathers drive their children through the hollow and laughingly tell the folk tale of a murder. But this story is real, and although many people would like to put this murder behind them, it is a unique incident in Pennsylvania's history and destined to be part of its permanent folklore. In the early 1900s, there were thriving Pennsylvania German communities in York and Lancaster counties. Some people in the area believed in a form of folk medicine called hexeria, a mixture of Christian verses, prayers, concoctions, and physical manipulations used to help or hinder followers. Most of those who practiced hexeria were called brokers or necromancers. The best ones helped people and seemed to have some mystical abilities. John H. Blymeyer had grown up surrounded by the lore of hexeria. His father and grandfather introduced him to an old book by Johann George Homan, the long-lost friend that brokers swore by. The powers were said to be passed down from generation to generation and were supposed to grow stronger with each new generation. For John H. Blymeyer, that belief was not fulfilled. Although Blymeyer was a fourth-generation broker, his power was considerably weaker than that of his father and grandfather. When John was a young man, he decided that he had been hexed by a more powerful broker who had weakened his powers. If he could break this hex, his bad luck would end. The only problem was that he had to know who had hexed him before he could break the spell. Brokers were paid to try for their clients. That meant that they tried to help influence the client's life in some way. They might give them advice, a love potion, rub a substance on a wart or sore, or say secret prayers. John did try for people, but he was not powerful enough to make a living at hexeria, so he was forced to take work in a cigar factory. John often spent his meager earnings as a broker and part of his salary from his factory job going from broker to broker, looking for information that would lead him to the person who had hexed him. At the factory where he worked, John Blymeyer met a 15-year-old boy named John Curry, who sought Blymeyer's help when he heard that he was working from a fourth-generation broker. Curry gave Blymeyer the respect that he longed for, and Blymeyer provided Curry with friendship. Curry was a sad and lonely young man. He lived with an alcoholic stepfather who beat him and his mother. His mother loved him, but she was overwhelmed by the poverty and abuse they lived with. She worked hard and tried to avoid the beatings. John Curry longed for a better male role model, and he chose Blymeyer. And so, a murderous friendship was born. Curry introduced Blymeyer to a family named Hess. 17-year-old Wilbert Hess and his family soon shared Curry's adulation of Blymeyer. They were happy to host a fourth-generation broker in their home. They were good and faithful people, and they had a Himmelbrief, a letter written by a broker that interweaved Bible verses with words meant to ward off evil, juxtaposed across from a picture of Jesus in nearly every room of their home, hoping to bring the family good luck. Unfortunately, the Himmelbriefs had not worked so far. They felt that their bad luck was due to a hex. They were sympathetic when they heard Blymeyer pour out his own tale of being hexed. In fact, Blymeyer and the Hess family soon became convinced that the same person had hexed them all. One night, Blymeyer went to visit a well-known powerful local broker named Nellie Knoll. She told Blymeyer that he and the Hess family had been hexed by another local broker named Nelson Rehmeyer. Finally, Blymeyer knew who his persecutor was. He and Curry hurried to the Hess home and told them the news. Blymeyer had done farm work for Rehmeyer as a young man. He had quit after seeing the older man go into a secret room under the kitchen through a trap door, a secret room that housed the great Brocker's magic. Blymeyer now believed that Rehmeyer was a practitioner of both white and black hexeria. The only way to break the spells of such a Brocker was to get a lock of his hair and his book of magic spells from the secret room. The hair had to be buried 8 feet deep, and the book burned. The Hess family also knew Rehmeyer, and they agreed that he must be the one hexing them too. They instructed Wilbert Hess to accompany Blymeyer and Curry on the mission to break the hex. The 3 men went to the Rehmeyer farm. The first night they merely watched Rehmeyer. On the second night, the 3 worked up their courage to attack Rehmeyer. They wrestled the Brocker down and struck him on the head with a piece of stove wood, killing him. They believed this would lift the curse. They didn't see the death of Rehmeyer as a murder, but rather as self-defense. It was necessary to break the hex. They robbed Rehmeyer of the 97 cents in his pocket and set the house on fire. The hex was lifted, but their luck didn't change for the better. The 3 men were quickly apprehended, and their trials became international news. Reporters from around the world flocked to York to belittle the superstitious people who could believe in hexing, Brockers, and folk medicine. Blymeyer's attorney would produce evidence that Blymeyer had the mental age of an 8-year-old child. Curry's attorney would point to the boy's miserable life, and Wilbert Hess claimed that they had not intended to murder Rehmeyer. Despite the defense, the men were convicted of murder. The house where Rehmeyer was murdered was not completely destroyed, and it quickly gained a reputation of being haunted. In fact, the whole hollow would gain a reputation for ghostly goings-on. People have long claimed that Rehmeyer's spirit still haunts the land where he lived and died. Rehmeyer was murdered on November 28, 1928, and around that time in particular, his spirit is allegedly seen and felt. Perhaps his ghost is only the imaginings of people steeped in the lore of his murder, or perhaps his restless spirit returns to remind mortals of the evil that can be done in the name of good. Pennsylvania, seems to be well endowed with demonic sights and has more than one place known as a portal to hell, but perhaps no other portal to the demonic underworld is more popular in Pennsylvania lore than that of the 7 Gates of Hell. Interestingly enough, the historical information about the area is true. The 7 Gates of Hell is located near a little town that is today known as Hallam in York County. Hallam, however, did not start out so innocently. Originally, the town was named Helltown when the township was created in 1730. Just outside the edge of the original settlement was a sulfur pit, and people seeing the boiling brimstone immediately thought of hell. It did not take long until the area became known as Helltown. The name was changed through a bureaucratic typo when a clerk wrote it down wrong, and the name stuck. Today, the town is called Hallam, but it is located in Hallam Township. Off Trout Run Road in Hallam Township is a track that is barred by a red pipe barn gate. There are no trespassing signs, but if one insists on walking the trail despite the gate and signs, they will come to another gate and another and another until they have passed a total of 7 gates. These are said to be the gates that guard the path into hell. In the 1800s, this trail was a road leading to a remote compound composed of a large main building and several outbuildings. This compound was an insane asylum that housed hundreds of inmates. The remote site kept the inmates out of sight and out of mind, but the locals weren't happy about having so many potentially dangerous people in their backyards. There were ill feelings toward the insane asylum, and rumors were rampant in the area about escapes and damage done by inmates. In all likelihood, few of the stories were true, but the rumors turned otherwise nice people into suspicious neighbors. It is said that one night the building caught fire and the local fire department was called in. From the beginning, there were problems. The fire department had to fight their way back along the narrow road with their heavy equipment, taking up precious time. The staff at the asylum was busy trying to get the inmates out. The people on the first few floors were literally turned out on their own. They wandered the area and many got lost in the woods as they stumbled away in fear of the fire that was destroying their home. Those on the upper floors were not so lucky. They were trapped and died of smoke inhalation or the flames. It was a terrible sight to see, and the stench of burning flesh was gagging. The firemen worked to contain the blaze, but it was too late for those upon the upper floors. Well over 100 people died, and many others were severely burned. The following day, the townspeople began a roundup of the patients. There are stories that some of them were badly beaten by the groups assigned to bring them in. Others even claim that some of the inmates were killed by fearful townspeople. The asylum was never rebuilt, and the inmates were moved away. The property sat derelict for many years, and eventually the township decided to place gates up to block the curious from visiting the site. Through the years, new gates were added until the entire path was blocked off in 7 places. That series of gates begat the legend of the 7 gates of hell. No one seems to know how the story began. Was it the hellish nightmare of the people burning in the asylum? Was there really an asylum at all? Was it the name Helm that first ignited the tale? There is no record to give us answers, but for about 70 years, the stories have persisted. Generations of young people have whispered that no one can make it through the gates. It is said that strange fear grips people as they approach the 7 gates. As they pass the first one, they feel that they should turn back. A feeling of being watched and of impending danger gradually rises as the 2nd and 3rd gates are passed. At the 4th, real fear begins, and only the foolhardy make it to the 5th gate. Here the urge to run from what lies ahead is almost overwhelming. What happens beyond that gate is anyone's guess. It is said that if you make it past the 7th gate, you will find the doorway to hell in the ruins of the old asylum. Has anyone ever found the final portal to hell? It is hard to say because no one has ever come back from the portal with proof.